All right, Miranda, the majority of Republicans in office have seen and signed a very important document. It's the Taxpayer Protection Pledge created by the group Americans for Tax Reform. It's a promise from those who have signed it to never vote to raise the tax rate under any circumstance. But there's one big name in the GOP field, unofficially, who has not signed the pledge and isn't planning on it. That's former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, probable presidential candidate, we should say. A spokesman says, or spokesperson, I should say, says, quote, if Governor Bush decides to move forward, he will not sign any pledges. And joining us now to discuss this is the president for Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist. Grover, always great to talk with you.
Absolutely. Good to be with you.
All right. So we know, I think all the announced candidates so far have signed the pledge so far. Jeb Bush, the only one not to do it. He's not officially in the race yet. The only person in 2012 not to sign the pledge was John Huntsman. We know what happened with him. If Jeb doesn't sign your pledge, do you predict a similar outcome for him?
Well, I think at some point that he will make that commitment. This is not just a personal issue. This is now the Republican Party's position. The Republican National Committee endorsed the pledge and called on all candidates at all levels to make that commitment. We have 90% of Republicans in the House and Senate have signed the pledge. This is a pledge endorsed by President Reagan. This is a commitment not to raise taxes. The second half of the commitment is if you're not going to raise taxes, it means you're going to reform government so that government costs less. If you don't pledge opposition to higher taxes, you never get government reform. So if a politician won't make the commitment against higher taxes, he's telling you when there's a problem, he's not going to reform the government, he's going to raise taxes.
Grover,
that's what Democrats do. And the good news is almost all the Republicans have made that commitment. I think at the end of the day, Jeb Bush will as well.
You think so? I mean, you said this is not personal, but there is a history there between the Bushes and yourself on this issue. You do think that he would eventually will sign it if he does run in the race, despite what his spokesperson said?
Well, remember, his father would never have been elected president. He wouldn't have won the primary if he hadn't taken the pledge and defeated Dole, who refused, Bob Dole of Kansas.
Right.
He was losing to Dole until before he took the pledge, and Dole did not. Then he was 14 points behind Dukakis before George Herbert Walker Bush said, read my lips, no new taxes.
And it was all downhill from there. I want to move on, Grover, because we only have about 2 more minutes left, a little bit less than that. In fact, you did respond to someone on Twitter, I believe, weighing in on this issue. We have that tweet for you. Quote, if my dad threw away a perfectly good presidency, I would honor him by learning to avoid that mistake. So there you go. Now, on the other hand, starting back in 2011, there was a 60-minute story. Folks like former Congressman Steve LaTourette, who we were supposed to have on to have the other side of this issue, started throwing cold water on your tax reform pledge. But here we are, the anti-tax pledge, but here we are in 2016, and it seems like it's more popular than ever.
Yes, particularly because in 2011 and 12, the pledge made it easier for the Republicans to hold together and win a $2.5 trillion spending restraint and the sequester cap from Obama. The big victory we had against Obama to limit spending. We took spending from 24% of GDP down to 20% because we refused to allow tax increases as part of that deal. The pledge has been very helpful in reducing government spending.
Okay, Grover, we got only a couple more seconds left, but I want to get your quick take from you. The House and Senate, they're both supposed to vote on their budget proposal this week. Does that actually go anywhere, or are we talking about pie in the sky here?
Well, it's step one on having a debate. Then we have to go through all the appropriations. It's an important statement. It's much better than where Obama is. We're going to have to slog it through the Appropriations Committee. It's going to be a long summer.
A long summer, but a very important issue. Grover Norquist from Americans for Tax Reform. Always great to talk to you, sir.